Welcome back to the third episode of Chambers Chatter. I'm Laura Chambers-Babeles.
And I'm Shay Chambers-Helms. We are so excited today to introduce Harry Shakades. But however, I think you pronounce it a little bit different than we say it. How do you really pronounce it?
Fine. I grew up as Shakades or Shakades. I answered to everything.
Well, wonderful. We are so excited to have you as our guest today. So, where did you grow up in Beaufort?
I was born, there's a high school that is right on Bay Street, and our house was one block from that. And everybody else, there were 5 in the family, and everybody to go to Savannah was 70 miles then. Oh, wow. Because we didn't have the bridge going to Hilton Head. So you had to go to Gardens Corner, and if you took a left, you went to Savannah. If you took a right, you went to Charleston. Mm-hmm. So I guess my mother was tired of going to Savannah. And so she says, whatever happens, happens.
So you were the 5th.
So I was the 5th child. I was the last. And Dr. Black was my doctor. And a funny thing, my mother told me that he almost dropped me when I was a child.
Oh, gosh.
And when I was first hatched. And later in life, I was in a grocery store, and Dr. Black was in front of me. And we were talking, and he said, Harry, I almost dropped you as when you were a baby. And he remembered.
He must have been bad then. He must have been really close to it.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But we didn't have a hospital in Beaufort then.
Right.
And I went off to school. I went to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a military school because I had 2 brothers. And both of them had gone to the Citadel. And at that time, they had a general there named General Summerall. And he volunteered the whole school to go to war. All the classes went except one. And it was a sophomore class, and my brother called home and said, Mom and Dad, I'm joining the service. All my friends have gone to war, and I'm going to war. And his major was pre-med. And so when he got in the service, he told him his major was pre-med, so they made him a medic. And so when he became a paratrooper, he was a paramedic.
Wow.
And the only bad things is medics back then didn't carry pistols. They carried no weapons. And Johnny got wounded in 1943. He was in France, and he was doctoring on somebody. And a shell blew up, and he was passed out and almost cut his legs off because they froze.
Oh, my goodness.
And anyway, they had gone to the Citadel. And I said, gee, I was kind of girl crazy, and I knew it. And so I said, I want to graduate from college. And the best thing for me to do is go to the Citadel because they had no women there at that time. So I went there, and it was an interesting experience. I met a lot of people. General Mark Clark was our president at that time. And every Sunday he would come to the infirmary to talk to the boys. And I loved the weekends because I would go downtown to Charleston and go to the movie. And that was my outing. And I went there because I had a cold. I went to the infirmary, and they put me in the hospital. And I really didn't want to be there. Well, when you're in the hospital, you're excused for military duty. And I had kind of a heavy, beard here. And so I was excused for military duty. And I said, well, I don't have to shave. And all of a sudden, I looked up and General Mark Clark came in with another general. And I wanted to hide under the covers because I was unshaven, and I looked horrible, And they came up to my bed and they looked down. They said, "How long have you been here?"
Oh my goodness.
And I looked at him. I said, "Oh, just the weekend, sir."
Just the weekend.
But then my senior year, my father and mother came from Greece, and they first landed in New York, of course, and they lived in Savannah for a while. And then Daddy came to Beaufort and with another fella, and they opened the restaurant downtown. It was called the Ritz Cafe. And as a little boy, I would go in to that, and I really liked it because it was on the water, and I knew all the shrimpers, and they would call me Little Harry. And Bay Street was quite different because on one side of the street were all the Jewish people, and on my side of the street were all the Gentiles. And when the Jewish holidays came, that side of the street was all closed. On our side of the street, it was all open. Well, my best friend, his mother and father had a store across the street. He was Jewish. And we were just two young boys. We lived 2 blocks from each other. And we were 2 young boys that we kind of grew up together. And we would do things together. And we would kind of laugh when we learned to drive. And we would say, "Louis, do you want to be Greek today or Jewish today?" and we'd go to the Greek functions in Savannah, or we would go to the Jewish functions in Charleston, and we had a good time. And anyway, Beaufort was a sweet town. On Saturday, all the blacks would come off the island. That was their big day. And I was the first restaurant to serve a black person.
Wow.
That is instrumental.
And at that time, there was a fellow that was in Beaufort named Tutti Frutti. And Tutti would come into the restaurant and he would sit at the counter. And one time I tried to explain to him, "Tutti, it's against the law for you to be here." And Tutti didn't understand what I was talking about. And I got disgusted and I said, "Give him anything he wants, you know." And after that, the people would come in and they say, "Hey, Tutti." And it wasn't anything. Then, finally, it was, we were able to serve the black people and it was fun. But one side were Jewish and all those stores would close, and the other side were Gentiles and they would be open. It was a lot of fun.
And what was the name of your restaurant that you opened up?
When my father had it, was the Ritz Cafe. And in there, I met a lot of people. There was one fellow, I met a lot of Marines. They had a fellow that had marched the troops in Ribbon Creek, and some of them drowned. And they had a big trial in Beaufort called the McEwen trial. And he didn't do anything that the other drill instructors did. That was a bad scene. But they had Harry Truman And the base commander, Harry Truman, came to see. And anyway, the Marine Corps changed a little bit. And it was a lot of fun growing up because as growing up, the Marine children would come to Beaufort to go to school. And they were kind of whirly, they had gone all over, and the Beaufort people, we had gone to Hunting Island. But we got along good. We had a teenage canteen. One was at Paris Island, and one was in Beaufort by the tennis courts. And I was the first president of the teenage canteen.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
There was a Dr. Black and his wife. She would help us, the children help, and she was our sponsor. I was scared to death of her, and she was very nice to me. And her husband, he's the one that delivered me.
almost dropped you.
Yeah. And in later years, I was in the Piggly Wiggly, and he was in front of me, and he turned and looked at me and says, I almost dropped you when you were a child. He remembered.
That's so funny.
But we had a good relationship with Paris Island. They would come. We had their canteen over there, and we had our canteen in Beaufort.
What was it like starting a business? I guess you were taking it over from your father, but what was that like during that time?
During that time, well, when my dad had it,
And when you took over?
when I took over, well, I had gone to a military school, and I wanted all. There were 5 in the family, and I didn't particularly want to go to college. I thought I was too stupid. And one teacher that I had said, everybody in your family is going to college. You're going to be the only one not going. So I went, and after I found out that I was just like everybody else, it was okay. But then my father died my senior year at the Citadel. I was very upset. But everybody said, you got to go back to Beaufort to help Mama. So I came back, and I really didn't want to work over on Paris Island. And Beaufort was real small, and we had the building. And I said, well, I want to open a restaurant. And everybody said, you don't know anything about restaurants. Well, I said, well, I'll learn. So I went down to the bank, and Mr. Shepard was there. And I said, Mr. Shepard, I want to open the restaurant, and I'd like to borrow some money. And he twirled his cigar and looked at me. I was 22. And he says, you know anything about restaurants? I said, no, sir, but I can learn. And he said, good location. So he lent me some money, and I went to Columbia, and they had a fella that sold restaurant equipment. And he kind of directed me. He came, and we bought plates and silverware and everything like that. And the first day, I said, well, no, we're not going to serve breakfast. I told my waitresses, I had 5 waitresses, and I said, we're not going to serve breakfast. We're going to see the people, and then we're going to have lunch. And so when I unlocked the door, people just poured in. There were well wishes. And I looked out there, and here was all of Beaufort standing in the restaurant, and I was in the kitchen, and my mother was in there, and we looked at each other, and I said, I'm not going back out there. And there was a lady from Columbia who had helped my father, and she came down to help me. And she came in the kitchen and she says, "You go out there now and greet the people." And I said, "Okay." So I went out there and started greeting the people. And it was hard for me to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I was at my mother's house. And so I called the police department and I asked the police dispatcher, I said, "What time do you get off work?" He says, 8 o'clock. I said, "Well, I'm having a tough time waking up in the morning at 6. I said, "Would you do me a favor and call my house at 6 o'clock in the morning and wake me up?"
So, especially coming from the Citadel, you would think that that would just be ingrained in you. That is so funny.
Took it very easy to get out of that habit.
So you had the
And
police call you at
so
6
the
a.m.
policeman, every morning at 6 o'clock, he'd call up and he'd say, "Time to wake up, Harry." And I'd say, "Thank you very much." I'd put the phone down, I'd get dressed.
Oh my gosh.
And I would go pick up the help, and then give them a ride downtown. And one time, I shouldn't tell this, but one time I had the car and in front of the Baptist church, the road was kind of big and it was icy. Beaufort had a big ice storm. So I said, I wonder what this would feel like if I spun the car around. So I took the cereal and I did like this, and I spun it around 3 times, and I said, "Wow." And I looked in the back seat and they were scared to death.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't tell them that I was going to do that. But,
Oh gosh.
little Beaufort, you could get by with things at that time.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great.
I'm curious, what was the time frame of when your dad's cafe closed down and when you reopened? What was that time frame difference?
He died in January the 20th. I got out of the Citadel in June, and I opened September the 15th.
So
Wow.
not okay,
Just right
Pretty quick.
there.
Wow.
And where was it downtown? What building is there now?
There's a lady, I still have the building. There's a alleyway, and my building was to the right, and there was a Beaufort bookshop to the left. And my building, it was real funny because, I didn't like the front window, and I said, I want to change this. And I knew nothing about construction. And I looked at the building, didn't realize how old it was. But the whole building is made of tabby. The walls are 16 inches thick. And in the old days, they used to take the oyster shells and they would mix it with sand and something else, and it became strong. And my whole building is tabby.
Amazing.
And anyway, the walls are 16 inches thick.
Wild.
And I wanted to change the front, so I had a big glass window there. And all the men of the town would come and they would sit at the front table, and that was the round table. And all the merchants, they would come at a certain time, and that was their time. And then the other people would come at a different time, and that was their time at that table.
Oh, that is too fun.
But it was real nice. And then next door was a flower shop, and it became the telegraph office. And I knew the girl who was working behind the telegraph office, and I told my mother, I said, "Mama," I said, "it's time for you to go home and go back to Greece and see your family." And so she said, "You think you'll be all right?" And I said, "We'll see." So we got the tickets. Then next door, there was a travel agency, and my mother went by ship. And anyway, she went and saw her family. And when she was getting ready to return, the woman at the telegraph office, I knew that she was coming back. And the woman at the telegraph office, she comes to the front door and she looks at me and she goes like this. And I said, oh my God, the ship sank, you know. And
What a terrible feeling that probably was.
I saw I went in there and the lady handed me this telegram. It was from my mother. And she says, happy anniversary for the restaurant.
Oh, that's so special.
And I said, oh my gosh.
And you opened John Cross Tavern as well,
I
correct?
opened John Cross. The building, the original name of the building was John Cross Tavern.
Okay.
And in 1973, I knew that South Carolina was going to pass the liquor law. And what it was, we had the liquor stores could stay sun up to sundown. And you would go into the liquor store and everybody, you would see all your friends there, and everybody would buy a bottle of liquor and half a pint, and they'd go home and they would sit there and watch TV and take a drink of liquor, and they didn't know, you know, they didn't measure anything. And so when I first opened the upstairs, the girl from the newspaper, Penny Carpenter, she brought the head of the ABC commission down to Beaufort. And he looked at me and he said, and what are you doing for alcoholism? And I looked at him and I said, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I said, you'd go into a liquor store and you'd see a man buy his bottle of liquor. He would go home and sit in front of the TV set, and he wouldn't measure, and he'd just sit there and watch TV. I said, now a man comes up, he comes into the restaurant, and the mini bottles, you know, are there, and the drinks are kind of expensive. They're 75 cents a piece.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
And I said, he has his 2 drinks, he sees his friends, and he's happy. He goes home. And I said, that's what I'm doing for alcoholism. And the guy looked at me and he says, that's a good point.
That is funny.
And so I became friends with him.
I want to know the craziest encounter you had at either Harry's or John Creek.
Oh, the crazy.
Most interesting story, craziest story.
The most interesting stories, well, they decided to do a film in Beaufort about Pat Conroy, The River's Wide. And I met all the actresses and actors. They would come upstairs, and I went down there, and they were filming in Beaufort, and I went and I looked at the man who was playing the father of Pat Conroy, and he was an actor, but when he got out of the car, he looked like a typical Marine. He had his uniform, he had a cigar in his mouth, and he got out of the car, and I started laughing, and we had to close Bay Street at that time, so they could do, you know, all the cameras came in. And it was fun meeting all
That's
the
really
actresses
cool.
and actresses. And
That is really fun.
yeah. And I met, you know, the girls would come upstairs and I met one girl, and her hobby was being in movies. And she was an extra. And they would tell her where to go. And she would go to there. You know, it was interesting meeting the different types of people.
Oh, I'm sure.
That went.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But Beaufort had an eclectic of people. we had the black people, and Martin Luther King came to Beaufort, and he was formulating his plans at Penn School. And Penn School was located at Land's End, and I was real surprised that he had come to Beaufort to because I really didn't know that much about Penn School, but I met some of the big people. There was Abernathy, and he would eat in the restaurant, and
Wow.
it was just interesting to see that.
That is very cool.
And then one time they had a group of people that would come, and they sent them to South America, and it was a program that the United States government did, and they were housed at Penn School, and there were people from different occupations. They had college presidents and different people, and they learned how to live off the land, and they would send them to South America, and they would come in with different T-shirts. There were teams, and each team had a different shirt on, and they would send them to South America and all over.
Wow.
That's fascinating. How long did you keep your restaurant open?
How long?
How long were you open,
I
Harry's?
was open for 47 years.
47
Wow.
years.
Wow.
I wanted to make it to 50, but my leg says, "Okay, Harry, this is enough." Because I had the downstairs in the daytime and John Cross at nighttime, and up the stairs, down the stairs, and anyway.
That's a lot.
But it was interesting, and met a lot of people. And
What's been your favorite thing about how Beaufort has evolved, or what stood out to you the most over the time that you've been here?
what was my favorite thing?
Or biggest involvement that's happened since you've been in Beaufort in your lifetime?
Well, I enjoyed meeting all the movie stars, of course, and I enjoyed meeting the people that came from different areas. And I had a friend that he was a real sharp fellow, and he invited me to a party, and I met this lady there that her husband, I played tennis, and then he came to, and I would play tennis with him. And anyway, Joe, I met his wife, and at a party, and my friend Joel says, "You know who you were talking to last night?" And I said, "She was very nice. She was married to the guy that I played tennis with." And he said, "That's Stalin's daughter."
Wow.
And I said, "The Russian Stalin?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "My goodness," I said, "my wife is reading her book now."
Oh my God.
And I said, and we became friends. Russia is Orthodox, and Greece is Orthodox. And one night, the Catholics, when they do this sign of the cross, they go to the left. The Greeks, the Orthodox, go to the right. And the reason being is years ago, when all this came about, the Orthodox went to the east, and the Catholics went to the west.
I love that. Well, as we wrap this up, is there anything that you would want to tell kind of the future generations of Beaufort, to kind of what you would do to help them preserve the history and the stories and the legacies that you've gotten to live through?
Beaufort has such a beautiful history, and we have such an eclectic array of people now. I mean, they're from all over. And I hope Beaufort never loses that. I love the architecture in Beaufort, and I couldn't think as big as your father did with the waterfront park. I it was fun seeing the shrimp boats back there, but we had an 8-foot tide, and the boats would go way down, and people would have a tough time. And now we have the waterfront park, and the boats can come up there, and it was a lot of fun. But the park was named after the proper person.
Yeah, that was not many people can think as big as he did, for sure.
Quite a visionary.
We just greatly appreciate the time that you came, and just thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.